Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. We are back with episode number 47, Everything Teams Phone Live. Here to talk about some cool stuff. We have there was a bit of a mix-up on some scheduling here. So basically, I had the content, so I post the information about who's going to join our podcast, right? And I put the content was right because Microsoft has got a big announcement, or there's a nice announcement that we're going to talk about that's going to really start to impact those frontline workers. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I did put Tom Arbuthnot as our guest today, and Tom Arbuthnot is not our guest today. We actually have Microsoft in the house. So Jason Wade, Microsoft. Jason, thank you for joining us. That's the crowd going wild for Jason and Microsoft. All right. Well,
happy to be here.
Thanks everyone for joining today. Brandon, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm thinking Jason, he joined us, and just to prove that Teams is so good, he's messing with our video quality. He's like, yeah, this is not Microsoft Teams. I'm just kidding, Jason. But here to talk about Teams.
Why are you on StreamYard? Who uses that?
Listen, I was sent a link.
Awesome. Well, guys,
fine.
Yeah, you're gonna clear it up. You're going to send it cleared up with a link. All right, everyone. Well, very good. Thanks for joining again. We've got a cool show lined up for you today. We have Microsoft, like we said, going to talk about some new licenses. Jason, some addition to some licensing that we're going to talk about, because one of the things that we see in this space all the time is if you're comparing providers out there and you go, okay, I'm going to either maybe you're a savvy telco person and you used to buy SIP trunks into your Cisco, let's just say SIP trunks and DIDs. And let's say you've got, 10,000 users across the globe, and you've got, 3 data centers where your Cisco is housed in and all that good stuff. And you've got, 500 or 700 SIP trunks, right? There you go. 500 or 700 SIP trunks all plugged into your data center. You've got, then you got your 10,000 DIDs for your 10,000 employees, right? Okay. So you're used to buying telco that way, right? And then you go to a Microsoft Teams and you go, this per user licensing is expensive, and then you've got, then you've got the dial plans that you buy from someone in Operator Connect and or Microsoft directly. But it's different. It's not SIP trunking and or DIDs. And I'm used to buying that way as an organization. So I think per user is too expensive, and it's been that way. So I've not moved my entire organization over to Teams for that specific reason, because I think it's too expensive, even though we know better, but you think it's too expensive. So Microsoft addresses it today. There was a big old announcement, like mic drop announcement. And Jason, why don't I turn this over to you, and maybe you can explain to us what has dropped. Everyone pay attention. This is interesting stuff. Go for it, Jason.
I promise not to get caught up in the weeds of license validation and how
he's like, let me look it up.
Multiple varieties of Teams Phone Standard to actually assign them to these various base licenses. I'm just going to skip that altogether and say, I think this is an acknowledgement by the product group that it is not apples to apples to say that a knowledge worker should be the same price in an enterprise voice system as just a first line worker that needs incidental utilization of a telephone, or a PSTN license, PSTN functionality. And so they have released a new variety of the Teams Phone Standard license that is assignable to a first line base license. So let's take an F3 user per se, or for example, I suppose. And now you can assign them a new license, a new Teams Phone Standard license that's more appropriate from a cost perspective for that persona. Now, Rick, I've said all I'm allowed to say. I'll have to leave the rest to you.
Let's clarify something real quick, Jason, just so our listeners are clear on what we mean by first line or frontline worker, because I don't want our listeners to think like, oh, I've got employees that fit the qualification of light incidental use case needs. So maybe a couple examples would help listeners understand that you can't just necessarily go out and get an F3 for first line, frontline license. Not looking to get into technical, just clarification on, don't get too excited if you're not truly a frontline company.
Yeah, the first line base license that would be required for this new variety of Teams Phone standard certainly does have qualifications, right? You have to have a few different attributes be part of that persona. One of those is within the first line use case, there's this expectation of shared devices. Either, hang on, either shared devices in a kiosk mode type setting or pure mobile based workforces. In fact, with the first line licensing, you actually can't leverage certain pieces of it on devices with larger displays than I think 10.2. It's some random arbitrary number. I honestly can't remember the exact one, but it's 10 point something inches at this point. So it's a very specific, set of use cases. People in a retail establishment that are moving actively around the store.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Right. That's a huge first line use case. So put your brain in that kind of context. If folks are roving around a dental clinic and they're just, they're mobile folks, or maybe they're grabbing a kiosk used machine that basically just sits there at the ready for anybody. That's going to be your first line scenarios. And that fits a lot of customers, but doesn't fit everybody, right? You still have knowledge workers. Thank you, Mr. Horner. 10.9 is the exact number for that limitation. At any rate, just keep it in mind. Not everybody would qualify for this licensing, but it's a much better price point for those personas.
I think that's an exciting move because for those that have been selling Teams and Teams Phone for a long time, we know we run into those scenarios and we work out creative ways to help the organization figure out how to deal with them. Is it the shared calling licenses? Is it whatever, right? So having a license to specifically address this, particularly I think about in the retail space. Now, the retail space is for us. We have a lot of organizations that have, 100 locations, 400 locations, they've got the retail, they're straight retail. And you look at that and there's not an individual, you're not assigning this to an individual. It's funny because you end up, in some organizations in our cloud PBX days, it'd be front desk, back desk, front of house, back room, exam room. It'd be all these different sort of, kind of generic names. Well, you can't do that in Microsoft, right? Because it is, it's person specific. Well, now with this frontline worker, Jason, we can go build this. That's not it. Is it still identity based? Is it still identity based? It's still identity based. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's still going to be identity based. And there's other news on that front, right? We've got some things coming down the pike. We've got documentation live now on shared calling. That's a really interesting frontier. So maybe that comes into play as well, where you have one calling line identity essentially that can be leveraged by multiple folks. And I'm sure you guys will have your own information to provide on that one at G12. But at any rate, it's all still identity based. We're not deviating from the basics of the phone system. It's an identity based phone system. It's one of the greatest attributes of Teams Phone. So holding true to that for sure.
Is it really to address the Teams Phone mobile? Is that what we're talking about? Is that what do you think the motivation behind it was? Is it to do the retail stuff? Is it to do the frontline worker? Is it to do Teams Phone mobile?
It is. It's really, I think it's really for retail use cases are a great call out. I think we've had a lot of feedback, and I'm saying this because I was part of it. A lot of feedback that first line was a bit of a deal breaker. We'd have all this great velocity in a Teams Phone opportunity. We're ideating with a customer, talking about how much value this solution can represent for the way they do business. And we just stumble when we get to first line. And we say, you and I recently had a customer, in fact, and they have thousands of first line users. But to your previous point, their largest location was like 10 users, right? They tons of locations, only a few users. They're all in sort of the first line category. And when you get to that part of it and you're trying to do like ROI value calculations against the solution, the TCO is not pretty on the first line front. So I think it's just a direct answer to what has been a struggle for Teams Phone in the pricing arena. We could always do the functionality. The functionality wasn't really a question. In fact, there's really no functionality being changed with this particular new license that was released. But now it's just little easier to actually make the TCO appropriate.
Okay, so Jason, one thing around that, and
I
maybe
think that's going to be a good one.
maybe you can't answer is so the announcement drops. Did they state the GA date for that license, or is that still coming?
Yes, February 1st. So I don't know how much I should peel back the curtain here. I think I'm going to stay on the safe side and just say February 1st is what I've been told.
Yep, good enough. Not asking you to dabble your toes.
And I from what I understand, I've got pricing. Like I've got pricing here. Like and just so I think I'm right. And Jason, this is $4 a user versus your traditional $8 a user. Is that right?
It's actually pretty funny because depending on who you talk to at Microsoft,
He's like, I can't confirm nor deny.
Right? You get, hey, we're releasing this license. It's this price. One individual that broke the news to me a little bit ahead of the announcement said, hey, we're gonna make this special thing we had for super secret people in the past. We're gonna actually make that permanent. We're gonna release it to everybody. And I was like, oh, okay. So there was a program for this. I see. So yeah, February 1st, it's just going to be more broadly available. That's the reality of the situation. So not too much to bake here. We've got sort of have the license in the wings waiting and ready to go for customers who want to take advantage of this for your first line workforce. And I think there's a ton of those. To my previous point, there was strong feedback from not only me, but the members of my team in SMC, and then certainly from enterprise, from the retail vertical. I've got some peers that work specifically in the retail vertical, manufacturing vertical. They were staunch in their feedback saying, my customers can't handle $8 per user per month for a Teams phone license for these first line folks. It doesn't make sense. So I'm super pleased to see the change.
Right.
And
I am too. When you go to market with Microsoft and you go to market in specific verticals and you go, okay, Teams Phone is good for a lot of people, a lot of organizations, right? And then, that have a lot of knowledge workers. But when you get to that frontline worker, like you said, when you get to that frontline worker, the numbers start to get a little out of whack for the customer. And oftentimes they still kind of like, they'll try to figure it out. I think what this is going to bring is wholesale sweeping change to all of the verticals and organizations that were kind of keeping it back a little bit. I think this is going to be a direct impact to physical prem solutions that have been out there, whether it's Mitel, Cisco, whatever, you've got NECs, Avayas. If you've got those platforms in place today and you've been kind of holding back on going to a per user model, I think this is I'm not going to call it an assault. It's like a direct shot at replacing those solutions. And I think you're going to see a massive windfall for licenses, for these particular licenses. And it's going to help you, all of your partners like a G12 Momentum move forward in those larger organizations that have frontline workers. That's going to be exciting.
Absolutely. I've had employers as well as customers who stayed in legacy on-prem licensing because they didn't want to be forced into the subscription model. The dollars didn't make sense. They already owned their licenses. They owned perpetuals for, the Cisco ecosystem, as I keep pointing to this phone back here. And so, we have a lot of holdout. Yeah. And I think that will meaningfully relieve the pressure to bring some of those into the modern UCaaS space. And I can't wait because there's a lot to appreciate, a lot to enjoy. I don't need to tell you two that's the case. So
let me mix in another topic with this, because I'm intrigued on, and this is for you, Jason. I'm intrigued on how maybe as you're talking to your customer base, how from a first line, front line perspective, how do you see like shared calling also playing into the strategy to reduce that cost even more?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was a little worried when shared calling entered the discussion, right? Shared calling has entered the conversation. How that was going to work with our carrier partners like you guys, right? Because they still need a Teams phone license. But now we're talking about cutting down the number of calling plans, whether that's, whether that's Microsoft calling plans or G12 calling, but whomever's calling plans. If we're starting to diminish the number of those that are needed, that can represent massive cost savings. And so I think we've already had a decent answer in the past with auto attendants and call queues. You can sort of arm your workforce with a central phone number if they need to make calls under the banner of your main line and all that. But now you don't need to give them a distinct DID and just, adopt that central line. You don't need that central DID or that individual DID at all. You can just adopt that central DID directly at the user level. Save some costs. I think it's pretty exciting stuff, but I think the way you guys are productizing your calling plans, it was already pretty unpainful. So I'm a little less excited about shared calling, admittedly, than I am about the first line change.
And do you see first line case scenarios where they're gonna leverage shared calling and the first line? I would assume that's going to be a huge use case right there.
Definitely. I mean, it gives you the other side of the equation, right? First line is going to do the, hey, let's make the enterprise voice solution itself more reasonably cost effective for all of our first line workforce. But now also, hey, we can just give them that mainline phone number because it's a really small storefront. We don't need complicated IVRs. We don't need to play menu options to our callers. We just need to distribute those calls to multiple individuals with that same main number. It's sort of a key system type feel, right? I think that's really the piece we were missing, if I dare say it that way, in the solution. So I find the two of them as a combo, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I would say they complement.
I'm curious, Jason, is I think so too, and if to put this in a real world scenario. Sorry, I'm a bit laggy. I think put this in a real world scenario. If we take the organization we were chatting with yesterday or a couple of days ago, whatever, it was like, the amount of users, thousands and thousands and thousands of users. Is there a percentage of licenses that are going to go, okay, here's the frontline worker, here's the shared calling that we can do across all these other workers, and then here's our normal knowledge worker, normal plans. And you look at that and you go, that's a massive savings to get them into that.
Yeah, it's, it hasn't been a breakneck race to the bottom in the UCaaS space yet. That's the world according to me, of course, right? One man's opinion. And this, we're talking about a substantial proportion of dollars, especially, that customer to which you're referring specifically has a ton of first line users and a ton of first line users. They're in scope for Teams Phone, right? So that is a lot of dollars that Microsoft is now sort of letting them hold on to. Hopefully we're able to find other common customers that can leverage that same benefit. Because I didn't do the math on it, but I just sort of did a little mental math. It's a lot of dollars when you're talking about that many users.
Yeah. That's going to be exciting. Brandon,
I'm waiting.
Him lagging or me? Jason, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
So I'm lagging now.
We're all doing a wonderful job.
It's this StreamYard. It's not the Teams platform.
Yeah, it's a fantastic one.
Well,
if StreamYard,
it's just I do have a little. I did see if your connection is unstable, so I'll take the blame on that one. I apologize, everyone, if I'm fuzzy on the video and all that stuff. So, all right, well, that's pretty darn exciting from a Microsoft perspective. Like I said, I think that's going to open the floodgates for opportunities for these larger organizations that have not moved over, and I think you're going to see the adoption of Teams Phone grow substantially over the next 2-3 years. Actually, it's going to grow substantially anyway, but this is really going to help sort of loosen those log jams that we're keeping those premise-based customers at bay. This is going to really help loosen things up and move it forward. And I think it's kind of I think it's paying a bit of homage to the opportunity in the Teams Phone mobile space. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for these, Teams Phone mobile organizations that are these organizations that are heavy mobile users to start to think about adopting Teams Phone mobile now, right? That'll be interesting. Doesn't this qualify? That's not 10.9 inches right there. Thank you, Mr. Horner. Right. So that would certainly qualify, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Jason's
I've
not
had
saying anything.
some. Am I not? Uh-oh.
Well,
Maybe
but
I'm not having a
No,
problem.
you're good. You're
Yeah,
good.
no.
You're good.
Keep in mind though, Rick, like your identity is what the license gets tied to. So it's not like you could have your frontline license tied to your cell phone and use your same identity to tie to your computer for your day-to-day, office work, so to speak.
Yeah, I've had some really complicated licensing scenarios.
Yeah,
where
if
I'm
you're
trying to-
that's if you're an. No, go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I've had some really complicated licensing scenarios where I'm trying to talk customers through, hey, here's how you license these first line users. Since it is all still identity based, some of them need some really interesting functionality that we don't normally bundle into the first line licensing. And depending on those details, sometimes you may run afoul of the first line persona and some of its requirements, but you can add on specific licenses if you need Exchange Online Archive, for example. Even though these first line users, you wouldn't think they'd be that heavy email, there are step ups that you can sort of buy to get some additional functionality for them. But you just got to make sure, if you're going to need utilization of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the rich client on those larger endpoints, desktops, and so forth, you're gonna have to license that a different way, right? You're gonna have to do perpetual licensing. So the real puzzle of Microsoft licensing in 2024 lives in first line, man. That's what we call home. It's licensing challenges for sure. So
I'm going to shift the topic just a little bit because I think we've hit on what's happening in the licensing space, and we're excited about it. I think that's going to bring a ton of opportunity for us. But I saw some new releases of more dense analog adapters. So the audio codes line looks to have been expanded to me to very, very dense analog sort of line capacity now, right? You've got access to the audio codes 1288 to tie into Teams, which I think will do 96 analog lines, something like that, maybe even more. Is that right?
I think more actually.
Yeah, it's all modular, so it can do more than that. But let me get over to. I'm going to get over to that page as well because that was a really nice surprise to see a really dense box.
Well, let's talk about that.
There's a lot of them here.
I think it maxes out at like 288. Are you seeing a lot of dense analog at this point? Because I do my very best when I have customers with a significant analog footprint. I try to get them to convert as much of that as possible to a modern equivalent, right? A VoIP-based endpoint or fax by email, whatever the case is, whatever the reason is they have that dense analog functionality. What are you seeing for use cases that customers are trying to preserve in 2024 with dense analog?
I'll give you a big one.
Yeah. So lots and lots. Oh, go ahead, Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a lot of at least what we see in the industry. It's a lot of residential based businesses. So think retirement homes, assisted care. These businesses that are their focus isn't on technology; it's on human caregiving, and they're not necessarily going to go invest in a rip and replace of the old school, RJ in all the rooms and all the analog back into the closets from the punch down. And so we have to get really creative on our solutioning on, okay, how do we take it from the patch or the punch down, and how do we convert it to VoIP that then, we're actually, I was talking with one of our salespeople yesterday maybe about a solution where I think we needed to reach into something like 50 or 60 rooms for a assisted living, and needed to figure out how to bring all that back into a Teams solution, because the business, whoever the business is that owns the retirement home, wants to go to Teams, but they also want, they want to figure out, well, we've got the analog devices to the room. We need to make sure they can still call that front desk for anything in case Teams goes down. So there's lots of conversation around, okay, let's let's be creative. Let's figure out how we go do this. And Rick, I don't know if you've got other examples, but that's probably one of the big ones we see.
That's the big one, I think, is that sort of the communities like that. But then I also see quite a bit of it in the healthcare space, not just the healthcare space that you're referring to in residence care, but healthcare in if you take hospitals as an example. I think I've got a hospital that's a really, really good candidate for this license because they've got analog lines to so you've got your normal working, office working lines, you've got your normal phone system, and then across the hospital they have red wall phones on, external to rooms down the hallways for someone just to grab in an emergency, right? So all these external red phones are on a completely different, not different punch down, but they're they're served by a bank of analog lines. And so it's, in that scenario, there's probably 200 or 170, somewhere on there, so 170 to 200 analog lines that aren't part of their phone system today, right? They're working on migrating from Cisco to Teams, not part of the phone system at all, and not being able to address it with their phone system, right? So literally the prior solution was going to be a bank of AdTrans, right, with a lead SBC AdTran to go and create 200 analog lines and keep a stack of AdTrans in the organization in a colo, right, in a rack in their basement. That was going to be the solution. So this is, we were like, let's not do that. Let's just not do that yet. Let's go see what else we can do. We'll put a big dense adapter. They had VGEs in different places for some of the stuff that were connected to that, but they hadn't moved those devices over to any VGEs. They didn't want to buy any more VGEs for their Cisco. They're obviously into life, and so they're like, okay, we don't want to do those analog adapters from Cisco. What can we do? I'm like, just hold on, we'll figure it out. And at the time, the density on some of this on the audio codes devices weren't there to be able to support that just yet. And now you've got the ability to do 200 and something. I mean, done and done. It's so you can go. So that again, it's helping clear the log jam of solutions for organizations that are moving from on-prem, that need to move from on-prem into the Teams ecosystem. So,
well, and a lot of the
I'm excited to
devices
see that
organizations would use in that old world. You just mentioned Cisco, right? Like a Cisco VG350 built out with a whole bunch of modules so they can support a whole bunch of lines. Those devices were crazy expensive. Do you know the list price on this audio codes device by chance? I mean, they were tens of thousands of dollars in the Cisco world. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, it's like $22,000, right? Like $22,000 for a really, really dense one. I think $22,000 does 96 ports, because I literally have a quote out for that for some organizations today. So
Gotcha.
So 96 analog devices or ports for $22,000, and that is, you're going to have in that device, you're going to have, it's a chassis solution. So you're going to have backup power, you're going to have backup WAN, you're going to have all, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All right, so that's a good one to talk about. That's.
I was going to say, I know that analog lines, it can be hard to justify ripping them, but keeping them is also pretty expensive. Like, I don't know how to really delineate the decision point for the customer. If one of those options is 22 grand and it's keeping that legacy infrastructure, keeping those single pair running everywhere, that's a tough one. I'm interested to hear how that customer decides to proceed.
Yeah, and I would say that.
Well, if you look at what it costs. Now, go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
Our best show ever. No, I was going to say, I from conversations we've had in the past with customers, it's the analog line solution is the deal breaker, because it's really for them usually not a question of, can we rip out the lines and upgrade to next gen DIA based or Ethernet based services. It's, if you can't give me the solution, then we're not going to talk. So we're constantly looking for that, that creative solution that keeps legacy tied to modern work, essentially.
That makes sense. That's a good point.
Yep. Well, and this again, just the license change, the analog devices, this all clears the road for massive sort of migration from CPE or from premise-based platforms right into the Teams ecosystem. Another one that I want to throw in the fray here, since we're talking about things that are going to be helpful for people to move from solutions, is faxing. That now we can address faxing with that analog line stuff, but faxing over SIP is never fun. It's not fun at all, right? So unless you're doing it natively, if you're doing it via data versus dial tone, doing it data versus with HTTPS and changing it into an encrypted document and all that good stuff, that makes it a lot more secure. It makes it a lot easier to transmit across networks, and is ubiquitous. So Brandon, tell us a little bit about what you've got going on in the fax world, because this is a big deal for organizations that have a lot of faxing and or have already migrated some of it to a different solution. This is going to be pretty interesting. Brandon, what do you got going on there?
Yeah, without getting into too much detail, we're working on I'm going to air quote native, right? So I'm going to say native, but I don't really mean native to Microsoft, but a Teams native like application that we're designing that is, as an enterprise, you can go find this application in the Teams app store. You can propagate it to your enterprise users. And essentially the idea is we're bringing electronic fax. I can't say the shortened version of it, I don't think, but electronic fax into the Teams ecosystem as a play for these customers. It seems like they care more about the ancillary services than they care about the phone system when we're talking to them. And
Yeah.
fax happens to be one of them. And so the way we're going to address the market is we're going to go to market with an application that sits right in Teams, just like your chat icon or your calls icon or your Teams icon. It's going to be a fax icon that you click on it, and it's the intent is it's either a per user base, if that's how you want your fax line, or a per account base, or embedding it into a Teams group that now you can assign it to a team of people to manage that fax, and then working on tying that into a fully HIPAA certified compliant solution that allows you to take that fax into your data loss prevention systems, your own encrypted ecosystem, and kind of like just get away from the whole fax to email, because at the end of the day, fax to email is kind of like fax to a machine. It seems kind of archaic. We will still support those ideas, but we kind of want to bring it into collaboration forward technology, where it just feels like another piece of your collaboration. Who had ever thought fax would be a piece of your collaboration? But that's what we're doing.
Well, it kind of makes sense though. We've got chat in Teams and then calls in Teams, and then you guys have already been doing SMS, right? So you've got that next icon down is SMS. What other communication mediums do you have? Well, if you're going to be unlucky enough to still need fax, let's put it right there. And then to your previous point, fax is already a means of transit. Why do we need to then stuff that into another means of transit, email? Like, documents are best in SharePoint. They're best to live in the collaborative settings we already have available to us. So that's super exciting to me. And you guys are awesome for doing that. I mean, we're not doing that. Microsoft isn't baking that. So thank you for filling in that part of the story for sure.
Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, we've seen competitors.
It's pretty cool.
We see competitors out there that do the whole, hey, if you put our little application on-prem, then we can feed you the fax into your computer, your server, and then you can store it. And so really we're just taking that concept and going, let's not even waste our time with on-prem solutioning. Let's plug it right into your state-of-the-art modern work environment, which is Microsoft, and let's connect it to your SharePoint, your data loss prevention, whatever it is you want, and let's just go. Now you can just, with a click of a button, set up your fax and never have to pivot off of Teams to get that that compliant fax solution to work for you.
Can I put you on the spot on your own podcast?
You can try.
Okay. All right. Well, and I'm not going to hold you to it by any means, but do you have any estimation of when it's going to be available? Because it sounds like you're pretty much there.
Yeah, MVP is about 4 weeks, and then from there we'll take the rough edges, polish them, and go to market.
Okay. Hey, that's
Quote me
again,
on it. That's
we're
estimating.
not. Well, it's hard for me to quote you on it because what else am I going to do? We're not building it.
I'm
right?
totally quoting him on it. 3-1.
3-1. We're live.
3-1 for Brandon. That's 3-1. That was where I was like 3-1. I'm not sure which way you can see me, but it's 3-1. But that just to go back on that, what I think is really cool and how the design is transferring over here. You use fax in a departmental environment, right? Oftentimes you've got it in HR has got one, recruiting has got one, whatever, right? So I think that the software team is building it into a team, so you can stick all your HR people into a single fax line, and they have access to it in the team. It's such it's so cool because it just matches the way people work today in departments. And nobody thought about bringing a legacy application like faxing into a modern day, workplace experience. And it's pretty cool. You'd be surprised how many organizations still use fax. Right. It's mind blowing because
I'm not surprised.
Healthcare,
I'm appalled.
government agencies. I see Mr. Horner on here. John, you concur? Yeah. I know John's listening today. And so it's like, government agencies, healthcare, education institutions, all very, very heavy on the fax side still.
Yeah. So it's still more often than not, we have to cover off on fax conceptually when we have these Teams Phone discussions. Even if my customer isn't in one of those verticals you've cited, they may not be an organization you'd think of as needing fax, but it's just, man, it's hanging out there. It still exists. People are still demanding it in certain scenarios, whatever they may be. That's the answer, though. To your point, G12 has been impressing me for a while now with the SMS functionality, group managed SMSs, right? So you used HR as an example. You have recruiters connecting with applicants for all these different job postings. Well, now you can have centrally managed SMS numbers that you're using to communicate with those applicants. Now you can take their documents if they want to. I don't know why they would, but maybe they want to fax in their documents. They can do that, right? You have that same concept with fax. And so again, applause for me.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, not necessarily to the fax piece specifically, but just the general idea of customers want when they approach anyone, whether it's G12 or our competitors. I think what the primary thing they're looking for is an out of the box turnkey solution that just works for them, right? I think companies are tired of asking the question, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And so I think one of our goals is to become that out of the box turnkey solution in partnership with Microsoft to say, you need it, we got it, and we're going to make it feel as native and ubiquitous as possible so that you can live and breathe in a collaborative space without going, oh, now I've got to switch to this app or I've got to switch to this portal. We're just going to give you as clean of experience as possible, and without really even trying to take the focus off of Teams first mentality of it being Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, gentlemen, the swivel chair is dead. You've had a significant hand in making sure of that. So
this is what's cool here is that the collaboration is real. I mean, the licensing adjustments that Microsoft is making, the ancillary services that we're building so that we can check off the boxes to complete a solution. And you put those two things together and you've got a real good partnership in the new, G12 momentum and Microsoft. And so it's taking that solution out to the masses it's a pretty exciting thing because you do win a lot of business because it's a fun thing to go migrate these organizations and see the new sort of communication style, to see their new engagement and how they engage with their customers, right? That's a big thing is, internal productivity, external, simplicity. Those are some things that really sort of move the needle for an organization, and it gets pretty exciting to see that we're taking part of it in conjunction with Microsoft. It's pretty fun.
It is. I just don't know what's on the horizon anymore, right? Like, I guess Teams Phone is going to continue to gain additional features, but I'm sitting here counting off all the things I thought about historically, and we're just like, between G12 and Microsoft, I'm running out of things left to say, hey, we have to solve for this problem because my customers have this demand, and it's unmet demand at this point. Well, we're sort of running out of that. It's a great problem to have, but like, I want to see the product continue to evolve and continue to incorporate new functionality. So I'm looking forward to whatever's coming.
And I
I've
think
got a question. Here's and Brandon, this is your guess too, Brandon. This is
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Go.
I was gonna annual sort of guesstimates here, right? We're 2024, kicking off 2024, 11 days into 12 days into it here. And I think the last quarterly, I forget the carrier sort of discussion that we have with Microsoft. We're sitting at 18 million or so PSTN subscribers, right? Within Teams, 320 million users. I'm not gonna disseminate how they're calculated, but 320 million users, and you've got 18 million PSTN users. What is your guess, Jason and Brandon? And I'll give you mine. Where do you think 2024 is going to end up from a consumption perspective of PSTN lines?
With all these changes, I think, and I'll go first if you don't mind, Brandon. I think 24 million is not out of the question for licensed Teams Phone users. We're breaking down some real impediments from the last few years, and so I think it could be a massive year for all of us here.
Yeah, and Jason, your guess is right on line. Mine, I was going to say 25-ish million maybe, and then I was going to facetiously say, can I phone a friend over at Cavell and get them to tell me their number?
That's a good idea. That was a good idea, Brandon. It's like your lifeline. Is that your final answer? I love it. So you got 24 million with Jason. You got 25 million, Brandon, right? And I'm going to take the high end of it because I'm the forever optimistic person. So I'm going to go 26 million is where I was feeling like things were going to end up. 26 million subscribers, only because I think Teams Phone Mobile towards the end of the year will find some really big enterprises to take on sort of let's be first or second or third or 10th or whatever it's going to be, right, for Teams Phone Mobile and deploy it in a massive way. So I know we've got lots of subscribers out there doing it, but I think you're going to see some big organizations take down Teams Phone Mobile. And I think that's going to contribute to the overall number. And it'll be, 26 million. All right. Well, that's good for all of us. Yeah.
Teams Phone Mobile has been a really interesting one in my patch. I've had customers be interested in Teams Phone Mobile when they're more worried about governance, when they're more worried about retaining control of their phone numbers, irrespective of how the end user wants to do it. We've got a lot of customers with powerful end users, think law firms, right? Well, lawyer one of the partner top attorneys in the law firm doesn't want to install Teams. They don't want to deal with Teams on their mobile. The idea that you can just assign that same phone number that's part of their Teams identity and assign it to an eSIM on a mobile device, that's been really interesting for those customers when they want to really have that power to give the phone number, but they keep control of it. They own the number. They get to control where it goes. If that attorney leaves or goes and makes their own firm, they get to keep the number and assign it to somebody else, and they can have whatever behavior they want to as an end user. It's been pretty powerful for those firms. I do think it'd be nice to find some big players who are wanting to go all in on that.
I think it'll happen. I think especially in the banking industry, look at the trouble, the big name banks have been in recently for their out of band communication via the cellular network. I think you're going to see a look at that, and they're going to, companies that are responsible to say the SEC for compliance, they're going to look at that, and if they're team shop already, they're going to go adopt it to try to say, hey, we've covered our basis.
It's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
So I
angle.
think it's coming.
Yeah.
So then from a concurrence perspective, we all think I'm right. Is that right?
Yeah. Sure. I didn't even. Yep. Rick's got it.
It's 26. All right.
Yeah, and
Well, guys, I think we should draw this one to a conclusion a little sooner, because from a technical perspective, I think it's been a pretty challenging show. I think there's some bandwidth issues on a couple of places, so I think what we should probably do is wrap it up here a bit early today, unfortunately. But boy, Jason, thanks for hopping on the show so that we could pull together some information to share with everyone out there. The F Suite licenses, so that we've got cheaper frontline workers, first line worker, Teams Phone Solutions. It's going to dislodge the backlog of CPE or premise based organizations. So that's pretty darn exciting. Brandon, any final words on stuff?
Yeah, fix your internet. Actually, it might be my internet, so maybe I need to fix my internet. Maybe it's StreamYard, but nonetheless, Jason,
I
thank you
think
very
it's the
much for
pair. I
joining.
think it's the pair of us, because I see Jason going. Sorry, go ahead.
like,
Wrap it up, buddy. Go.
All right, everyone, have a great weekend. Happy MLK Day on Monday, and we will see you next Friday for Everything Teams Phone Live.
cheers, gentlemen.
See everyone. That's a wrap.